Hello, my name is Phil Southerland, CEO, co-founder of Team Novo Nordisk. So I want to take a little journey back in time for all of you. So if you could think back to where you were 4, 5, 6 years old and you had your first dream. Does anyone remember that moment? You know, when you wanted to be a scientist, to be a doctor, be a healthcare professional, give a talk at South by Southwest, right? Whatever it might have been, but that first dream that you had and then the empowerment that you felt upon having that dream, something that you could strive for. So I now want to take a step farther back in time to 1920, at a time where my people with type 1 diabetes, the only dream they had was death. Because in 1920, there was no insulin, there was no tools, no technology, no treatment to help with the healthcare of this disease. Fortunately, in 1921, Frederick Banting and Charles Best, they won a Nobel Prize for the invention of insulin. In 1922, they tested this in human trials as their commitment to get this to all the people in the world. And it was commercialized and distribution then took place in both Europe and North America. Fast forward another 60 years and things remained about the same. Human insulin got better, the distribution methods got better, but the technology was not present. The dreams for people with diabetes were staying alive. The dreams were not going blind for too much longer. The dreams were to keep your legs for a little bit longer. But ultimately, this disease, diabetes, was everything about what you could not do in life. And it was traumatic. For anyone who was diagnosed with diabetes, it was assumed that they were going to die an early death. So I think, I want to talk about how the evolution in technology has led to the evolution in dreams for people with diabetes. And I can speak predominantly for the last 37 years, because in 1982 I was born. And then later that year, at the age of 7 months old, I got sick. I'd lost a few pounds. My mom took me to a doctor's office. The doctor said, "You've got the flu, come back in a week." She took me to another doctor's office who said, "He's got the flu, bring him back in a week." And over about 2.5, 3 days, I'd lost 10 pounds, 40% of my body weight. And my mother carried me dying in her arms into the hospital and said, "Please fix my baby, please fix my baby." And so I guess some prayers happened. And a couple hours later, the doctors came back. I said, "Ma'am, we have good news and we have bad news. The good news is your son is going to live for now. But the bad news is he has juvenile diabetes based on age of diagnosis, current standards of treatment, technology, and education around diabetes. He's not going to live to 25. If he does, he'll either have renal failure or be blind. Here's your insulin, good luck." And that was that. My parents went home with a dream at that time that they'd get to see me live as long as possible. She was happy. My mom was very happy that I was alive and that I was going to go home. But she was devastated because she knew that her child was going to die at some point in the near future. And the technology at the time was squeezing urine off of my test strip, out of my diaper, onto a test strip to find out where my glucose was 2 hours in arrears, right? And that's not really an effective way to manage diabetes, especially when we're on human insulin, which at the time was acting kind of whenever it wanted to act. It was somewhat unpredictable. And in 1983, we got blood glucose testing. That meant that we could, for the first time, my parents could prick my finger, prick my toe, whatever they did at the time, get blood, 2 minutes later, see what my blood glucose was at that moment. So my mom likes to say she was a continuous glucose monitor far ahead of the time, because they were telling people at the time, check your blood sugar 4 times per day. But my parents were checking my glucose 10 to 15 times per day to find out, when did insulin work? When did food take effect? What were all the factors that went into my blood sugar? And then how could they make my glucose more like their glucose in hopes that that would lead to prevention of complications? And early on, in that time frame, my parents began to believe, because at a time when diabetics were not supposed to exercise, they found that when I was moving, when I was playing, when I was active, the insulin worked better and my sugars were better. So even though a short life was predicted, my parents figured I might as well enjoy life while I'm there, so they pushed me out into sport. And I'd say sport for me has been a priceless drug for the duration of my life with diabetes. I think it's a priceless drug for everybody, and it's the billion-dollar drug that unfortunately rarely gets prescribed these days. But What we saw was, my parents now had this dream that I could survive, that I could live, because they were getting pretty decent numbers out of me. But, it wasn't their disease, it was my disease. And so at 6 years old, my mom did me the favor of passing the dream on to me. And, at the time, I was at a birthday party, time for cake. I refused my insulin shot, and she said, "That's fine, you'll go blind." I said, "Excuse me?" Even as a 6-year-old, you know what it means to see, not to see. And she said, "Don't do your shot. You'll go blind by the time you graduate high school." And so I begged her for my insulin. I got it. And at 6 years old, my dream to keep my eyesight became real. And that was, it's kind of sad looking back that my first dream that I remember is that I want to not go blind from diabetes, but that's the reality of it. Shortly after, I went to my endocrinologist's office, Dr. Larry Deeb. I said, "Larry," I got my hemoglobin A1C test done. And for those who don't know, the hemoglobin A1C is a 3-month average of your glucose control. It's essentially the report card for people with diabetes. And I got my report card back that day, and it was 8.2%, and I said to Dr. Deeb, "Will I go blind from this?" And he said, "I can't tell you no." Long-term studies have gone on to show through the DCCT and EDIC diabetes control complications trials that hemoglobin A1C under 7% leads to a 70% reduction in the risk of complications. So I asked Dr. Deeb, "What do I have to do so I don't go blind?" And he said, "Well, maybe more small injections. Don't eat food when your glucose is over 200, and just try to come back under 7." And so I was 6 years old. I had a dream not to go blind. I had insulin. I had testing supplies. So I went to work. And in the daytime hours, I controlled my diabetes. That was it. At night, I was fortunate to have my mom as a parachute there. She would check my glucose still twice per night to make sure I wasn't dead in bed. And we had some scary times, which I'll get to in a minute. But six months went by. I went back to Dr. Deeb's office, gave him my blood, and then raised hell around the doctor's office for another 8 minutes until the number was ready, and it was 6.8%. And I went to Dr. Deeb. I said, "Will I go blind from this?" And he said, "No. If you keep it here for the duration of your life, you probably will not go blind from diabetes." And I was dancing with joy, right? But it was 6.8% then. Then came the process of keeping it there. And this is where I really feel that sport came into, sport was, again, this technology for me that was priceless. As I was competing in sport, my glucose was better. And when my glucose was better, I performed better in sport. So it was a symbiotic relationship where I was really motivated to take control of my diabetes, which is not often the case for the youth growing up. So we got to this point where I was playing on the swim team, I was playing football, basketball, baseball, and then at 12 years old, I made the most important mistake I've ever made in life, and that was putting 35 cents into a candy bar machine and pulling out a Snickers bar. And so I got a Snickers bar, I ate it, my glucose went to 300, not good for your A1C, and I had some choices to make. Some people would say, "You can't eat a Snickers bar," right? And I've never said no to anything because of diabetes. It's just about making adjustments so you can say yes. So I went about saying I can give insulin and wait 2 hours because that was rapid insulin at the time. And for a 12-year-old with no patience, that wasn't an option. I could not eat Snickers bar, but I really didn't want that one. I found that if I rode my bike to the gas station 2 miles away, I'd buy a candy bar, eat it, and then go ride around the neighborhoods until my legs hurt or I was hungry and got another candy bar. So riding turned into racing. It became a passion of mine. I was 8th place at junior national championships, 9th place at under 23 national championships. And I was doing all this on blood glucose testing about 20 times per day and human insulin up until 1996. And I'll tell you, managing type 1 diabetes with human insulin, and then you throw an exercise on top of that, I'd equate it to running a Fortune 100 company on fax machines and pagers. It was done in the past. You could do it, but it's far from optimal. And I'm fortunate to the pharmaceutical companies, the technology companies who have continued to advance our treatments so that us people with type 1, for the most part, don't have to operate on that ancient technology. So the bike for me was this gold mine. Granted, after some very difficult bike races, I went to bed in my bed, woke up with paramedics standing over me. There were times I went to bed and woke up in a hospital. There were times I was in school and after the day after a very hard training ride and was in class. And then one time in class, I asked a girl for a candy bar and she said, "No, Phil, I brought this. It's not for you." And I passed out 4 seconds later. And Jane Gertman later cried and she brought me a whole bag of candy the next day. So diabetes does have a lot of perks out there. And but this passion of cycling for me all changed when I was about 21 years old. I won the SE championship for the University of Georgia in the Southeastern Conference. This guy came up to me, Joe Eldridge. He introduced himself, said, "Hey, I have diabetes." We met, we became friends. He was my first friend with diabetes at 21 years old. And we connected on a lot of levels. We had a lot in common. But when it came to diabetes management, I, at the time, A1C in the low 6s, and Joe was up about 11%. It's just, it happens for people with diabetes. It's easier to prioritize a lot more exciting things than it is to prioritize managing diabetes day after day. So Joe was just in need of a light switch, and it was our friendship that got him motivated to take control of his diabetes. After about 6 months of being buddies, he lowered his A1C down below 7, and he came to me and said, "Phil, I just want to say thank you. You saved my life. Because of you, my dream of seeing my grandkids grow up, I know one day can come true." And so this was, as we're in Austin, Texas, this was in the time of Lance Armstrong and all of the awareness he was raising through cycling for the cancer community. And diabetes did not have heroes. There was no one who had done what we were doing before us. And I said, we need heroes, we need role models, we need people to look up to. And the kids need motivation to be empowered, because if you're excited about taking control of diabetes, you can do some pretty cool stuff. But if you're not, then it can be a pretty painful disease for you and your family. And so we decided to form Team Type 1. And this was at a time it was still just 2 kids in college. I raised $400, bought some T-shirts, sold those to raise money, and then fast forward about 6 months, and I got put on a trial with a continuous glucose monitor. I had a Dexcom 3 to begin back in 2005, and then I got put on a Freestyle Navigator, which was a 20-day trial where I had the data in front of me. And I'll tell you, I learned more in 20 days than I'd had in the previous 23 years about managing diabetes. It blew my mind. It's like how much I did not know after 23 years of checking my blood sugar 20 times per day. So I said to my doctor, this is a big evolution in technology, but it also was a big evolution in my dream. I was like, with this technology, people with diabetes as a team could do some pretty great things. So we found 6 other type 1 diabetics, put a team of 8 together to compete in the race across America. And through some clinical trials, thanks to Abbott Diabetes Care, we got access to the Freestyle Navigator the day before the bike race. So first day and a half of the race, we're using this. We have no idea how to use the technology. It's a pretty steep learning curve. Our things were troubling, but about a day and a half in, we figured it out. Then we started going really fast across the country as the charity team. And lo and behold, 5 days, 16 hours, 4 minutes after starting time, we got to the Atlantic Ocean, only to learn that we'd lost the race by 3 minutes to a team of professional bike racers. It was the best and the worst moment of my life, all right there. So we came back. We'd started a little movement within the diabetes community. We got sponsorship from a couple of pharmaceutical companies. We got sponsorship from Omnipod. And we decided to come back with all the knowledge that we had of how to manage diabetes during sport. So the second year we showed up, everyone was scared of the diabetic team. And for me, that was just awesome. We were competing against a team of professional bike racers, super cool guys, Vail Beaver Creek team, but they were afraid of the diabetic team. They'd won the race the previous 4 years. They were scared of us. And guess what? They were right. We got across the country with a lot more unfavorable wins the year 2, in 5 days, 15 hours, 43 minutes. And when at 25 years old, when I was supposed to be dead, when I was supposed to be blind, I was on the podium with 7 other type 1 diabetics as champions of the world and world record holders in this race across America. Thank you. Thank you. So that led to yet another dream, because we went to this conference called Children with Diabetes right after that, and I saw the joy on the faces of all these kids when they knew that a team of type 1 diabetics had won a race across America. It's like, it was the coolest thing ever. You could see all of them motivated for the first time to take control. You could see the joy in their parents' faces, the hope that the parents had that their kids were going to be okay. And I said, we have to globalize this mission. So let's try to use the bike as a platform and get to the Tour de France. So we started a professional team in 2008. We had riders with and without diabetes, and from 2008 to 2012, we raced in over 30 countries as the diabetes team, became one of the top 25 teams in the world, and arguably inspired a whole generation of young kids who wanted to become bike racers, in any sport for that matter. And so in 2012, we got this unique opportunity, and that was to partner with Novo Nordisk. They came to us, we came together at a lunch, had a discussion, and then a few days later, I got an email saying, Phil, we'd be delighted to partner with you. We'll do a long-term partnership. We'll activate the partnership on a global scale under one condition, that you go back to your roots as an all-diabetic team. And so they wanted us to race at the Division II professional level as an all-diabetic team. And we sat there wondering, can we do this, right? There weren't enough athletes out there. I had 4 athletes racing professionally at the time. So we had to find an additional 12 athletes with diabetes. We scoured the planet for kids with diabetes who raced bikes and wanted to be professional. It's me. And we found some good ones. But the thing was, our guys, so we fielded this team. We had to teach athletes from 10 different countries, how to manage diabetes during exercise. They were all getting continuous monitors for the first time. Some were getting modern insulin for the first time as being part of our team. And then we had to go throw them to the wolves. The first race we did, the previous year, this was in 2013, the 2012 Tour de France winner Bradley Wiggins was also in that race. We were racing against world champions, against Tour de France champions, and we were doing it as an all-diabetic team. But the thing about it was, our guys didn't just, racing with diabetes wasn't our biggest challenge. Being very green, but yet racing at the top of the sport was a big challenge. And also the fact that there was no respect for our team in the peloton. Because most people in professional cycling get there from years of fighting, kicking, screaming, clawing their way to the top to get a professional contract. Our guys got a contract because they had diabetes. And there was no respect for our boys. And they got treated like crap for the first year until they proved to the riders that they belonged to be there. And it took us a couple years before we got results. And then once we got those results, they began to come.
In the race, it's always different than home. It's a lot of, your body is asking a lot of energy, and your body passes with a lot of different kind of feeling. You have stress, you have panic, you have a happy moment, you have sad moment. Your sugar can go like this, like a wave.
So as of the end of 2013, we finished as the 140th ranked team in the world. By 2015, we moved up to the 83rd ranked team in the world. And after the early start of the season, Team Novo Nordisk is now ranked, I think we were 50th when I checked last week. I don't know if we'll sustain that for the whole season, but it's good to be there right now as we stand here at South by Southwest. So the improvement in our riders has gone from, we've used the G4, Dexcom's G4, Dexcom's G5, now Dexcom's G6. And as the technology's improved, our athletes' management has improved, and our results have improved. But the athletes have said that's not enough, that's not enough, that's not enough. They wanted glucose on the handlebars. You see, having a continuous monitor, which I have in my pocket, is great, but you pull this out every 20 minutes during a bike race. And when you're doing 35 miles an hour and it's snowing, rainy, and the wind is going at the side at 50 kilometers per hour, it's not always easy to pull this out. And so maybe you get the data points every 20 minutes, maybe you get them once an hour. And I'll tell you, it's not enough. We need the data all the time. So our athletes all race with these bike computers, where I've got it in my other pocket, and some headphones. And you see, this has the information on it all the time. And the athletes carry these, every athlete who races a bike has a bike computer in front of them, telling them power, glucose, heart rate, all the info that you need to be a good athlete. And we tried to partner with various companies. I had a patent for this idea in 2009. The technology didn't really exist, or I hadn't met the right hacker at the time to make it happen. And we kept trying and failing. And then on a bike ride last May with Chip Hawkins, the CEO of Wahoo Fitness, he was a guy who you tell him that something can't be done, and then he builds it just to spite you. And so I told Chip that we'd been trying to do this for years. It hadn't been done. They said it couldn't be done. And then 2 months later, he sent me a picture of a prototype, and in December, I had it on my handlebars. And I'll tell you, having this technology in front of me at all times means that 12 data points per hour, every hour, hour after hour after hour. You look at an additional 60 data points in glucose over a 5-hour bike race, it's priceless information. And the first time I got that continuous monitor, and I learned more than I had in 23 years. After a month of using this while riding bikes, I've learned more about optimizing nutrition and insulin on the bike than I'd learned in the previous 15 years of exercise. So, our athletes have done some clinical trials starting last January. We're doing more trials at the Tour de California in May. We want to bring this technology to everyone with diabetes in the world because the information's been priceless, and the results that we've had to date are the best. And what this has done for me is evolved my dream just one step further. I now believe that because of this technology, not only are we going to get to the Tour de France, but we can put a type 1 diabetic in the yellow jersey in the Tour de France and at the finish in Paris. That's now the dream. And these dreams would never have gotten to where they are today if it wasn't for the consistent evolution in technology. This evolution in technology has led to the evolution in dreams. And my dream was to see an all-diabetic professional team. My dream is now to see a type 1 diabetic in yellow at the end, finish the Tour de France. But there's hundreds of kids now who, because of this dream, have their dreams coming true and are competing as professional athletes. So I just have to pause and say thanks to all of those with diabetes who have died for our cause. Because for 60 years before glucose monitoring, years before that, people they died, they suffered, and it's their suffering that pushed the researchers, pushed the industry to make technology, make treatment better for us. And it's because of their loss that we are now able to do what we do and thrive how we thrive with this disease. It's because of them that type 1 diabetics can now say we can do anything. And I'd like to thank all of you for your time today. I thank South by Southwest. And as you have the rest of your time here in Austin, just connect with people. Go out there and dream big, because if you dream it, it can be done. And look out for the Tour de France. It's not if it happens, but when it happens, and then how effectively we can change the world for people with diabetes by doing so. Thank you for your time.